All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. If more people want to jump in, we'll just let them trickle in, but we'll go ahead and get this thing rolling. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to Longwood's 10th annual last lecture. Before we start, I'm going to introduce myself and explain a couple of things. So I'm Grace Walton. I'm the last lecture event coordinator for the Geist Chapter of Mortar Board here at Longwood. We host this event every year. This is our 10th one. COVID or not, and we are super proud to present this event, even though it is a bit different than our previous years since it's on Zoom. So in lieu of applause, which is something very typical, and there's usually audience feedback. So again, feel free to pipe up if you want to, but we also encourage you to use the reactions button to clap. So that's the little smiley thing on the bottom tab of your Zoom. So feel free to use that whenever you want to cheer. So now on to a bit more about the last lecture. This is a yearly event where we invite faculty or staff members to speak their own hypothetical last ever lecture. Randy Posh was a computer science professor who thought about what words of wisdom he would give after he found out that he had a pancreatic cancer terminal diagnosis in 2007. So at Carnegie Mellon, where he was a computer science professor, he gave his own last lecture in 2007 titled Really Achieving Your Childhood Dreams. A year after, he published a book which has become super popular, and it's sold over 5 million copies. And now every year across the country, and even in some places internationally, people present their own last lectures at universities in both honor of Randy Posh and because of our love for academia. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead and introduce our very first speaker tonight. Dr. Carkenord was born and raised in Michigan. He has an undergraduate degree from Clemson University with a major in psychology and a minor in advertising. He has a master's and a PhD from Bowling Green State University in Ohio in industrial and organizational psychology. From 1990 to 1992, he taught at Georgia Southern University, and he's been teaching full-time at Longwood since 1992. He has two great daughters, Bailey, who graduated from Duke University last year, and Jamie, who is a junior at William & Mary. His current favorite hobby is playing guitar in a lousy little garage band with some guys in Richmond. Without further ado, take it away, Dr. Carkenord.
Thank you, Grace. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank Grace and the Mortar Board organization for putting this event together. It's difficult enough to put a campus event together in the best of times, and in the COVID times, I'm sure it's doubly difficult. So thank you guys for organizing this. I got an email from Grace in November, I think, inviting me to speak at this. And I had two quick thoughts. One came right after the other. And the first thought was, wow, how humbling that someone would think I had something valuable to contribute. And then the second scary thought was, geez, I don't think I have anything valuable to contribute to this kind of an event. But I reflected on it a little bit, and I thought that maybe as a psychologist, I can add a few things that are worthwhile. So now I'm going to try to share my screen. Have you allowed us to share?
Yes, you did have permission.
All right. All right, everybody seeing that? 5 little things that help me keep my mind in a good place. Yep. So what I'm going to talk about, as I say, kind of a psychologist perspective here. I'm just going to share with you five little things that I've kind of learned throughout my life that help me, as I say here, keep my mind in a good place. None of these are my unique insights that I've gained. They're things that I've stumbled across at various points in my life. And my hope is that one or two of you guys may find one or two of these things useful. And I'm going to present them kind of as a countdown: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So for the number 5 thing that I do, I'm going to first tell you that I'm a real planner. And I have been a planner for a long time. I'm a big believer in planning. And in general, this has served me pretty well in my life. But as we all know, things don't always go as we plan. And when I was younger, I used to get quite upset when things didn't go the way I planned them. I get kind of angry. It's like, hey, darn it, I put a lot of time in planning that. Why didn't it work out the way I wanted it to? And then at one point, I don't remember when, I came across this old Yiddish saying, and I'm sure some of you guys have heard it before. Man plans, God laughs. And I'm not a religious person, but when I saw that, I could still see the wisdom in it. And I had a bit of an epiphany moment. And I realized it's silly that I would expect that things would always go the way I would plan them. I can't control everything. I can plan all I want, but there's no guarantee that things are going to turn out the way I want them to. And I think if this COVID experience has taught us anything, it's that man plans and God laughs. Think of all the plans that were disrupted in the last year. Seniors in high school and college were expecting to have great senior years and had great plans, and vacation plans got changed and wedding plans got changed. So the number 5 thing that I do is when I'm making plans, I always try to remember in the back of my mind that man plans and God laughs. Because when I remember this, I'm not as disappointed or frustrated anymore when things don't go the way I want. When they don't go the way I want, I just literally say to myself, hey, man plans, God laughs. So that helps keep my mind in a good place. Number 4. Now, in that nice introduction, Grace mentioned that I play guitar in a lousy little garage band. And I'm going to use that as an example to start my number 4 here. I was just playing with my lousy little band yesterday in Richmond. And I enjoy it. It brings me a lot of pleasure. It's fun. But we're not very good. And we know that. And I'm not a very good guitar player. And I know that. But sometimes in the pre-COVID days, I'd be at a bar in Richmond, and I'd go in and I'd see a really good band. And I would really enjoy listening to them. But I'd also start to think, wow, my little band's never going to sound that good, or wow, I'm never going to be as good of a guitar player as that guy is. And it started to make me a little sad when I had those thoughts. And we can extend this, or I can extend this to lots of situations in life. I know people that make more money than I do. And I know people that drive a fancier car than I do and live in a nicer house than I do and are better looking than I am. And the list could go on and on and on. And when I get in a situation like this, I think about a saying that's been attributed to Theodore Roosevelt. And he said, comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. And that's pretty profound, I think. And so my number 4 thing is when I catch myself starting to make comparisons between myself and other people, I just remind myself that by doing that, I'm robbing myself of some joy. All right. And by thinking about this, it helps me focus on all the positive things that I have and all the positive things that I possess as a person. So that's number 4. Number 3. I'll admit to you guys, I'm a worrier. I come from a family of warriors and a long line of warriors. But I actually worry less now than I did when I was younger. When I was younger, there were times when I would worry to the point of what we call in psychology catastrophic thinking. I don't know if you guys have heard that term before, but catastrophic thinking is when you imagine forward the worst possible outcome of a situation, the worst case scenario. So give you an example. I might be driving to the airport to catch a plane to go to a conference, and I'd get stuck in some traffic. And the catastrophic thinking would just start cranking up. Oh my gosh, I'm going to miss my flight. Then I'm going to have to pay for another plane ticket. And then I'm going to be late to the conference. And I'm going to have to pay for an extra hotel room because they're not going to have my reservation anymore. And just on and on and on and on. And I don't know if any of you guys catch yourselves doing this or not. But the reason I worry less now, I attribute to this person. And this person is a French philosopher who lived a long, long, long time ago. I'm not even honestly sure how to pronounce his name, so I'm not going to try. I don't speak French. And I don't know that much about it, to be honest. But I was reading a little bit about him. I forget where I came across this. And he was writing about how he worried a lot and showed what we would call catastrophic thinking. And he wrote this. He said, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." And boy, when I saw that, I said, wow, that's me. I've spent a lot of emotional energy worrying about stuff that has never happened. And this really resonated with me. And it stuck with me. And so my number 3 thing I do to try to keep my mind in a good place is when I start to worry, I just stop and I remind myself that the majority of those terrible misfortunes in my head probably aren't going to happen. And that really helps. And sometimes I even say that quote to myself. I say, Dave, your life's been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. But it has really helped me over the years to stop that kind of catastrophic thinking and that worry. The number two thing. So quick little backstory. As Grace said, I grew up in Michigan. And when I was a kid, my parents would take me to church every week. And this is actually the church we went to, St. Peter's Catholic Church in Michigan. And when my parents took me to church, I think they had some hope and belief that I would be like this boy, right? A good, well-behaved boy in church. Unfortunately, they got something more like this. I would sit there and I would fuss and I didn't want to be there and I'd kick the pew in front of me. And I'm sure I was just a real delight to be around. I'm sure my parents were very proud of me. But I'm going to tell you about one Sunday when I actually listened to the sermon. And I'm not sure why. It was about a week before Christmas and the priest was talking about Christmas. And that's probably why I was paying attention. And the priest was talking about what a wonderful holiday Christmas was. And he said how we're all excited about Christmas coming. But he encouraged us not to wish away the week. Don't wish Christmas here. And instead, he suggested that we focus on this. And this was the phrase he used. And this has always stuck with me. He said, focus on the joy of anticipation. The joy of anticipation. And even as an annoying little 9-year-old, I got what he meant. He was saying, don't wish your life away and don't wish time away. Enjoy the moment. And when I think about what I've heard students say over the years, I wish this class was over. I wish this semester would end. I can't wait for graduation so I can be done with school. And I totally understand those feelings that students have. But if we're not careful, we can wish away big chunks of our life and miss some of the moments in that time that we're wishing away. So the number 2 thing I do is if I catch myself wishing time away, I try to stop and appreciate the joy of anticipation. And this is just another way of saying something a lot of you guys have heard before, that life's about the journey. It's not necessarily about the destination. All right, and the number 1 thing that I do to try to keep my mind in a good place involves a movie that some of you may have seen or may have heard of before. It's called It's a Wonderful Life. It's an old movie, came out in 1946. And it stars an old-time actor named James Stewart. And he plays a character named George Bailey. And for those of you that have not seen this movie or aren't familiar with this movie, I'm going to give you just a real quick synopsis of it. So this movie takes place in a small town called Bedford Falls, which actually from the film looks a lot like Farmville, or seems a lot like Farmville. And it follows the life of George Bailey in this town. And as a young man, George has big plans. He wants to leave Bedford Falls and travel the world. And at one point he tells someone else in the film, he says, I'm shaking the dust of this crummy little town off my feet and I'm going to see the world. But as I talked about just a couple of minutes ago, man plans and God laughs. And things didn't work out the way George expected them to or wanted them to. His father dies unexpectedly and he's forced to take over the family business. He ends up getting married, has some kids. and he never actually leaves Bedford Falls. And as he gets older, he gets more and more frustrated and unhappy with his life. He feels like he's trapped in this life in Bedford Falls. And when his business loses $8,000 through no fault of his own on the day before Christmas, he decides to take his own life. And this shot here is him on a bridge. He's ready to jump off this bridge. And I'm not going to spoil the ending for those of you who haven't seen it. But as you can probably guess, George doesn't end up taking his own life. And instead, he has an experience or a series of experiences that make him realize that, in fact, as the name of the movie implies, that he's really had a wonderful life. And the main thing that he realizes that has led to this wonderful life are the important people in his life, and mostly his family. And so the number one thing that I do is I try to watch It's a Wonderful Life every year, because it reminds me what's important in my life. And just like George, my family is most important in my life, and especially my two daughters. And my family has a tradition that every New Year's Eve we go to Richmond, and those of you who are from Richmond are maybe familiar with the Bird Theater, and they show It's a Wonderful Life, and that's our New Year's Eve tradition. And it keeps me grounded and makes me focus on what's important in my life. And to end, I'm just going to share two quick little things about my daughters. My younger daughter, Jamie, is turning 20 today. So today is her birthday, so I'm going to wish her a virtual birthday. And my older daughter, as Grace mentioned, is named Bailey. And we named her after George Bailey in the movie It's a Wonderful Life. So as I said, I hope a few of you might be able to find a few little tidbits in there that you can use in your life going forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carkenord, and happy birthday to Jamie. That is awesome.
Yes, thank you.
And if everyone would like to give a little round of reaction applause or throw something in the chat, you can feel free to do so. And while we're doing that, I'll go ahead and introduce our next speaker. So Dr. Chris Kukk is the Wilma Register Sharp and Mark Boyd Sharp Dean of the Cormier Honors College for Citizen Scholars and a professor of political science at Longwood University. Dr. Kukk is also the HarperCollins author of The Compassionate Achiever, Fulbright Scholar, and a member of Phi Beta Kappa. He received his PhD and MA in political science from Boston College and his BA in political science from Boston University. He was also an international security fellow at Harvard University's Belfer Center and International Affairs. Dr. Kukk was also a counterintelligence agent for the United States Army, director of the Jane Goodall Center for Excellence in Environmental Education, a research associate for Cambridge Energy Research Associates, and has provided the Associated Press, National Public Radio, The Economist magazine, NBC TV, and other media outlets with analysis on a wide range of topics and issues. His research and publication combine neuroscience with the social sciences and focuses on understanding how weaving values such as compassion into our learning, civic, and business communities affects the levels of financial, intellectual, and social capital. Take it away, Dr. Kukk.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you everyone for inviting me here to give a last lecture. I saw Randy Pausch's actual last lecture a long time ago, read his book like 4 times and enjoyed it. So this is a great honor to be here with you all. So thank you for that. I'm going to start sharing my screen. And all right, hopefully everyone can see that, right, Grace? All right, excellent. So my last lecture is going to be about connections. And I wanted to talk about something that I think we all need to do now to make our world a better place. And that, to me, is create new and more meaningful connections, especially in this polarized world. So I wanted to talk about something we can do right now to get our world in a better place, in a better spot than where we've been. Because I believe, and I argue, and I contend that when you connect ideas, facts, people, and places, well, you create a world of hope compassion, success, and wisdom. And I hope that when I'm finished with my brief last lecture tonight, that you start seeing connections in all that you do. So let's get to the main nodes of this last lecture. I'm just going to briefly just highlight some of we're going to talk about facts, but we're going to talk about facts and connecting them so that we can create a better understanding of the world around us and the world between us. We're going to talk about failures in a way that challenges conventional thinking. We're going to talk about connecting people that turns the good fences, good neighbors idea upside down. I'm going to talk about dreams as, and yes, you're going to hear this right, as cornerstones of reality by connecting them. You know how we're going to get there? We're going to use a little John Lennon from the Beatles. We're going to use a little Nelson Mandela. We're going to sprinkle some Robert Frost on there. And then we're going to talk some physics and math to make it all kind of gel together in some really cool ways. So let's get going. Oliver Wendell Holmes said, the main part of intellectual education is not the acquisition of facts, but check this out, but learning how to make facts live. For facts are simply independent, isolated pieces of knowledge. And simply memorizing facts might be good at succeeding in something like Jeopardy, but it's not very good for succeeding in life. Memorizing facts does not create understanding or wisdom. If you want to attain wisdom, you have to understand how facts relate to one another, how the bits and pieces of life fit or don't fit together. And once you start doing that in and outside the classroom, then you're beginning to quote Oliver Wendell Holmes, learn how facts live. You're bridging knowledge with understanding, and you're creating a mosaic of wisdom. So connect facts to create wisdom. Just like individual bricks, when they're connected, create a wall. Just like individual flowers, when they're combined, create a bouquet. The art of connecting facts is at the heart of building wisdom. So connect facts to create wisdom. Speaking of wisdom, really wise people learn from failures in all kinds of ways. Nelson Mandela once said, I never lose. I either win or I learn. Well, there's another way to look at failure or loss. And that's a mathematical paradox called Parrondo's paradox. Juan Parrondo, Parrondo, is a mathematician who found that when you take two independent failing strategies, so say you have a goal A that you want to attend, right, and get. Strategy 1 fails to get you to goal A. Strategy 2 fails you to get to goal A. But what Juan Parrondo saw was that when you connect two failing strategies together in math and alternate them, they produce one combined, connected, successful strategy. And you might say, oh, that's great in math, right? And maybe in theoretical math, but it's all around us, actually, in the real world. One of the most popular examples that are used that you can find on the internet for Parrondo's paradox is the growing of crops. For example, a strategy of introducing sparrows to a crop destroys the crop. The strategy of introducing insects to a crop destroys the crop. But when you combine them together, they help the crop grow. And the picture that you see there is actually inspired by some of my students when I brought up Parrondo's paradox. They said, Dr. Kukk, for the growth of plants, that when you have plants that are too cold, they die. When it's too dry, they die. But the combination of cold dryness leads to a dormancy, which helps them succeed to go to another life cycle. And you might say, all right, that's nature and that's biology and that's all good and fine. But then I would say that this way of thinking actually has helped one state in the United States address very successfully homelessness. Utah, in their program called Housing First, they took 2 different strategies, put them together to create a functionally zero amount of homeless in their state. So for example, it's often thought that if you have or attract homeless, it hurts the community via increased crime rates and hospitalizations. And if you give aid to the homeless, it is thought, right, it perpetuates the problem by creating a kind of independence dilemma, that they become fixated to the aid, right? And then that creates the problem over and over again. And then it also supposedly creates deficit problems. But Utah, check this out. They built brand new homes starting in 2005 for the homeless. And since then, they reduced it, as I said, to a functional zero amount of homeless in Utah. And they have saved approximately, quote, $8,000 per homeless person in annual expenses because the homeless were able to find jobs. Folks, what do you need? What's the most basic thing you need to get a job? An address. They became taxpayers and supported the entire system that was going on. So I would love for you all to become paramedics for Parando, right? Those are people who are open to creative insights and counterintuitive solutions to problems that conventional thinking have difficulty solving. So in a society where we tend to toss away losers and disregard failure, I would say pick them all up, use them in creative, counterintuitive ways, and find ways to success. You know the line, quote, good fences make good neighbors? Well, it's commonly thought to mean that a good neighbor is one you don't see and interact with. But that is not what the line from Robert Frost's poem, Mending Wall, meant. The meaning is actually in the title of the poem, Mending Wall. It's a poetic story about reconnecting and improving ties with your neighbors. Robert Frost's stone wall separates his apple trees from his neighbor's pine trees, but they meet at the wall to repair it together. Folks, the story is about unity and togetherness, not separateness. If you want to make strong communities, go to the virtual and real walls that are seemingly dividing people and start mending. Connect people to create communities. We even get the idea of good fences make good neighbors wrong. All right, here I'm going to team up a rock star, John Lennon from the Beatles, with a rock star in theoretical physics, Carlo Rovelli, to show you about the importance of connections. Rovelli simply and beautifully demonstrates very articulately in different books, such as 7 Brief Lessons on Physics and The Order of Time, that the world is made up of happenings and not things. Check that out. The world, reality, is made up of happenings, not things, right? He says, in short, that reality is only interaction. Or one of his famous quotes from 2 of his books are, the world is about interactive relationships. Rovelli's research on quantum physics, you see, supports John Lennon's words that, quote, a dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality. From Lawrence of Arabia's Dreamers of the Day perspective to Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech and idea. Everyone, reality becomes something better when we dream together. King and Lawrence of Arabia have shown that. I would argue our American experiment, even with its warts, its downs, its highs, supports that. And as Dr. Rovelli's work on quantum physics shows, quote, the world is about interactive relationships. Well, it's only the dreamers who dare to interact with not only their imaginations, but with others to make reality something better than it is. So connect dreams to create reality. Oh, and by the way, dream freaking big. Our reality is based on connections. because we live in a system of systems. And examples are all around us and even in us. For example, the microbiome in the human body demonstrates that we are a living organism of system within systems. Scientists have shown we are made up of stardust, literal stardust. I don't know about you, but I think that's freaking cool. Oh man. And then just think about it. We live in one of many galaxies, in untold universes, in a never-ending cosmos. Understanding and wisdom are found in the connections. For connections are the keys for unlocking the smallest to the largest mysteries of our lives. I have those two pictures up there because one picture is a picture of inside the brain, and the other is a picture of space. I don't know about you, but the picture on the right, if you zoom in, I think you get the picture on the left. And just if you're all guessing, the one on the right is the inside of a brain, and the one on the left is the cat's nebula. But even in pictures, you can see the connections between everything. We need to connect more than we ever have. And when leaders divide, I've seen it in my studies and in my counterintelligence days. When leaders and peoples divide, they seek to conquer, to colonize, or to destroy. But when people and leaders connect, they are striving for solidarity, for success. In short, they're seeking to become a citizen leader who builds, who connects, not one who divides and destroys. If you're dividing people, you're destroying. You're certainly not connecting. If you're seeking success and wisdom, be a person, be a leader who connects, because it's the practice of connection that leads to the creation of both. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kukk. That was wonderful. Everyone, feel free to do your round of applause for your reactions and type in the chat if you want to. And while we're doing that, I'll go ahead and introduce our third speaker of the night. Evan Long is an assistant professor and program coordinator of elementary and middle education at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. He is also a frequent contributor to the C3 Teachers Initiative and has presented at state and national conferences on social justice education, inquiry design model, authentic performance assessments, service learning, and brain-based learning. He loves Doctor Who, all things Boston, and writing/playing piano, albeit badly. Take it away, Dr. Long.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I will go ahead and attempt to share my screen. And Grace, can I get a thumbs up when it is playing? Awesome. All right, so my lecture today is Life Lessons from a Long Shot, not just a play on my name, but basically a core aspect of my identity. And I will disclose I'm a first-gen student faculty member who is more scared of public speaking than you can possibly imagine. So you can imagine being invited to something like this, how exciting it is, while also following two just phenomenal speakers. I will share that if anyone has that same fear, you're looking at a person who can give you a lot of life advice just for that. But yeah, so thank you for welcoming me. Also a little taken aback given a last lecture. I'll just disclose, you know, I'm not inferring age on anyone else who's spoken, but my life experience is probably significantly less. So therefore, you know, feeling a little undeserving, but, you know, nonetheless, still humbled and honored to be with you all today. So I say I'm a long shot, and I've come a long way, and that's basically going to be a big part of my advice to you today, learning not just, you know, sort of how you grit it out, but also, you know, just how you can avoid some of the mistakes people like me that come from particular backgrounds come from. So I'll disclose, I'm originally from Lowell, Massachusetts. Lowell is infamous in some places. We're the home of Jack Kerouac, if anyone is into that beatnik poetry, Betty Davis, of course, the Lowell Mill girls. My now wife actually got to live in a renovated Lowell Mill. But Lowell, unfortunately, is also known for another grittier fact, and this is something that, as a first-gen person, I still struggle with, and that is guilt or shame of roots, while also concomitantly having just an amazing amount of pride of where it come from. And so I'm actually starting off with not a movie clip, but a scene from a movie some of you have seen. It's called The Fighter. And on it is Mark Wahlberg, and he's playing a famous boxer. I've met him once. His name was Mickey Ward. And this is about his family overcoming a lot of the issues of Lowell, Massachusetts. And I'll disclose that one of these actresses is playing my mom's best friend back in the early 1980s. And I share that because this is kind of a notoriously rough family. The story of The Fighter is actually about Mickey Ward and his boxing career, and his brother, Dickie Eklund, who was the older brother of my mom's best friend, who unfortunately is portrayed actually by Christian Bale, had a terrible addiction to crack. Lowell was the home of HBO's High on Crack Street, and that was filmed maybe 2 or 3 streets from where I grew up. And again, Dickie's one of his sisters pictured here was actually one of my brother and I's early babysitters. And so coming from a place like this where, you know, I will disclose my mother had a 8th grade education. My father struggled with literacy, probably read at about a 3rd, 4th grade reading level. That causes all sorts of complications when you're a kid like me and you pluck me into college. In my case, I went to Boston University, which is a wonderfully big but scary place where, you know, people are, you know, just coming from different backgrounds. When I was in a college dorm, a suite, we went around talking about what our fathers did for a living or just parents. And out of the 4 of us, I think we had 2 MDs, we had an engineer, and my father, God bless him, made his living as technically a ditch digger, right? And so I arrived to college absolutely ashamed of who I was, trying to get rid of, you know, all of this, you know, working class, shameful, I don't belong here. And my talk to you is really the core lesson I learned in my life is never, ever apologize for where you come from. And don't you dare look down on people, but stop looking up to people as if they're your betters. That took me in my 35 years, about 34 years to come to. Now, with that, particularly regardless of where you come from, take your home and get those assets. And remember, no matter what your background is, there's a lot to love about where you come from. And at some point in your life, get out. But don't abandon home. Go out and travel, see the world, and bring the world back to your town and bring your town to the world. And in this, I really connected with when I was a graduate student in Baltimore, learning about the theory of cosmopolitanism, which we often think of as this kind of cheesy magazine, right? With like, you know, summer haircuts or something. But the word's a beautiful word, talking about the cosmos and being a citizen of the world, not abandoning where you come from. And so a big thing that I have learned, and I'm going to encourage you all, is to really embrace who you are, where you come from, bring that to the world, and bring that world back. You see here on the right, I think one of my favorite people who really exemplifies this, Anthony Bourdain. He's a very working class guy. I think he's from Jersey. I know he spent time on Cape Cod. You could put him in the fanciest dinner situation, you know, the 5 salad forks here and whatnot, and he would be just as happy at the diviest restaurant there is. And that for me is what I try to model my life on. Next piece of advice. Every comment counts. everything that comes out of your mouth counts. I'll share one of the things that makes me so nervous about speaking. When I was really little, I had hearing issues, and with hearing issues, terrible speech difficulties. On home video, we remember, I don't remember this, but my speech was so bad, I said, you know, Merry Christmas, Daddy, is what I said. And on camera, I said, go ask your mother, right? That's how bad it was. When I was in kindergarten, one of the teachers told my parents that your son probably isn't going to graduate high school based off of just trajectories, and we just want to prepare you for that. And something fundamentally changed in my life. The fact that I made it as a college professor makes no sense. If you saw my report cards growing up, my life fundamentally changed in 10th grade when I was given a world history report. I was on D-Day, and this woman here, Paula Godfrey, was my teacher, and my heart rate is going, and I gave a perfectly average presentation, and she stopped and said, Evan, have you ever considered being a teacher? You seem like a natural. And it's a basic comment, changed my life. First time I had an adult actually in my corner saying, hey, I see something in you. You don't have to, you know, stay here. Really cool. I met up with her. I was probably early 20s. I had lunch with her and I asked her, do you remember that comment? She said, not at all. I said, did you know that I was like having all these inner issues with speech difficulties? And that was like the moment that changed my life. And she's like, I don't really know what you're talking about, but that's fantastic. And so whether or not you're going into teaching or whether or not you're just, you know, going into, you know, this general workforce, every comment counts. You never know what you're going to open. The next piece of advice to you is don't be afraid to invest in your weaknesses. I did that with speech, right? I have to speak for a living, not a natural gift. When I was in high school, I really devoted myself. I wanted to be a basketball player, right? Was terrible. I ended up, I'll share, I shot probably about 100 free throws a day. I made the team, and my career, I'm kind of, I don't want to brag, but I set a scoring record for the state of Massachusetts at the JV level for fewest points ever in a career. 0. Didn't work out, but I found my next thing. I got into cross country, and I just kept on going. And I'll share that along the way, all both sports as well as when I made the commitment really to, I want to be a graduate student. I got into Johns Hopkins University, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. And I make it all the way to my master's thesis. And I'm about to begin, and I throw up. I will share, I made it, all right, there. I came back and I kept on going for it. I share that with you because no matter how embarrassed you ever get, you can never be more embarrassed than how I ended that particular career or that presentation. All right, next piece of advice. Talk to strangers. My best tidbits in life come from total strangers. Couple stories. When I was in high school, I worked at the Nashua Target, that's in southern New Hampshire. And I worked in this food section, Food Avenue, and this old couple came in and something seemed weird about them. And then I noticed that the woman was wearing an Aerosmith medallion. And at that time I was, shy, didn't necessarily want to talk to people. So I just asked her, kind of being nosy, you know, oh, that's a wonderful thing. Where might you have gotten that? And she told me, my son gave it to me. He's the lead singer of the band. Just so happened that I was a huge fan of the movie Spaceballs. And there's like this joke where my sister's cousin's roommates, whatever. And it was true. My uncle always told me that his uncle was golf partners with Steven Tyler's father. And so when the woman said this, I said, would you happen to know, the name clicked, the LaFontaines, and then their eyes clicked. Long story short, I had lunch with Steven Tyler's parents in the Target Food Avenue talking about my extended family, which I didn't really know that well, all because I talked to strangers. Zip forward, I have another job. I'm working at Starbucks, and I'm a history nerd. In fact, I taught history, and it happened to be November 5th. November 5th happens to be one of my favorite obscure holidays. It's Guy Fawkes Day. Remember the 5th of November. And to entertain myself, I would always do a history of the day anecdote. So, you know, happy this day, and I wish everyone a happy Guy Fawkes Day. And this gentleman right here, Conrad, his eyes light up, and he's, you know who Guy Fawkes is? If you want to look him up, Guy Fawkes was part of the gunpowder plot, sort of a failed assassination attempt. And this man, Conrad, stops me and says, I'm here because you have these holiday cups, which you see, which is just a nutcracker, and they look like Guy Fawkes. I am in charge of like the Guy Fawkes Bonfire Society, and I'm only here not for the coffee. I want to buy all these sleeves for my Guy Fawkes celebration. I sat down with him, had a great conversation. He turns out he knew my history professor, a lot of fun. But my most important advice that I ever got for a stranger was on a flight back home from a conference. And men, when we sort of are in polite company, I stick with sports. That's kind of what I was taught. But something clicked and we kind of realized, all right, I'm sensing maybe a little academia. And yeah, I told him I'm a grad student. He was a college professor, I think Dallas, Texas. And I was telling him I'm having this thing like, you know, I don't feel I belong here. And he gave me best advice I ever had. He said, why don't you feel you belong? And I said, well, think of, you know, how much of a phony I feel just walking around as if, you know, I belong here. I don't. He said, all right, you're looking at people as experts. Let them prove it. Stop waiting for permission to have a seat at the big boys table. Next piece of advice, use indignities with fuel. So when you're working class and you're stepping up into different environments, that there's a lot of anecdotes there where you feel judged. Sometimes it's in here, sometimes it's real. I was a golf caddy, I'll never forget. Might have been all in my head, but I caddied for a lawyer and his son who was about a year older than me. And he made me call his son sir. And that bothered me. That bothered me tremendously because it also triggered memories of my father who attempted community college. And one of his English professors told him, you need to go back to the 4th grade. You don't belong here. And so that anger was actually something that drove me. I'm not a highly intelligent individual. Average intelligence, I've used a lot of that indignity to get through my difficulties. But what I learned was that revenge is fuel that burns out quickly. And if you're ever teaching, I want you to really think, and this is true for anyone who's ever been burnt by someone or hurt. I want you to actually think of penguins, because this has gotten me through my darkest days. We all love penguins. They're like the cutest bird, but penguins don't fly, but you can still love them. The world is never going to work exactly how you want it. You're going to have people who hurt you. You're going to have someday perhaps students who emotionally hurt you, who don't do what you expect them to do. I want you to remember penguins. They don't fly. You can still love them. Next thing, pay attention to what you're paying attention to. And so in terms of just, you know, thinking of like little things, who here knows how to draw a penny from scratch? If I were to ask you right now, draw the face of a penny, probably couldn't do it. If I gave you a cheat sheet, most people can't do it. Yet we've seen it over and over and over again. And so in this age of mass media and clickbait and our cell phones, pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Over prepare. Wing It makes great chicken, not teachers or employees. Pause. Heard some great stuff about the cosmos. One of my favorite things that I ever did in my life, I quantified how many days I'm projected to live on planet Earth, and I and how many hours. All right. So based off of that, I got 25,915 estimated. We don't know. And when you're having a tough day, I heard star stuff. I'm thinking Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar. And you're thinking that, life is too much, or, you're going through a tough spell, our country's going through a tough spell, our world. It's helpful to think of existence starting on this cosmic calendar in January. And let's imagine that we put all of human existence, or all of our planetary existence, on a calendar. And turns out that Christopher Columbus just showed up like a second ago. Think about that, right? I think I just, not to feel small, but to not be overwhelmed. Go great. One of the best pieces of advice I had a housemate who really helped mentor me. She was a Department of Defense official. And she said, Evan, stop saying you're okay. Don't say you're okay. Don't say you're good. Say, I'm great. Watch what happens. And I'll share that that advice, fake it till you make it, definitely worked for me. 2 more pieces of advice. Get your analogy right. You've all heard this phrase, give a man a fish, you can feed him. Teach a man how to fish, you can feed him for a lifetime. I don't believe that. I think the analogy is give the pole to the student, give the tools, let the student self-discover. That's where real skill development comes. Stay in touch with your role models. Know your role models. I have a picture of Jimmy Carter in my office because he is, in my opinion, the best example of a citizen leader I could possibly think of. And follow Oprah's advice. Surround yourself with good people. But remember that being good isn't good enough. And so I'll conclude with this thought, because we're all aspiring citizen leaders. It is good to do good. It is good, for instance, on this chart, to be a personally responsible citizen who follows laws and donates to charity. It is better to be a participatory citizen, a person that is an active leader in the community, who is organizing for charity. It is best to be a justice-based citizen, where instead of just, sort of solving yesterday's problem, we're going to fight injustice unapologetically with joy at the possible, but also anger at the urgency for others. And that is the best advice that I could give you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Long. That was wonderful. We're all gonna be like penguins for sure. That is an awesome piece of advice. Feel free to do your reaction applause and drop some comments down in the chat if you want to while I introduce our last speaker. So, last but not least, we have Dr. Taylor, who has been here teaching English at Longwood for 21 years now and somehow is still learning on the job.
Hey, everybody. I'm really honored to have the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I want to begin with an email that by luck or providence I received last week. It's from a former student, and she writes as follows. So this is her. I'm not sure if you remember me. It's been nearly 10 years at this point, but I wanted to send you an email about how wonderful a professor you are. Okay, for the record, that is a great opening line if you want someone to keep reading. The senior seminar class that I took with you really shaped my love of theory and pushed me forward as a scholar. I made some interesting life choices after graduating from Longwood. I decided that going to grad school for English was too risky for job prospects. I ended up in sociology. That was a mistake. It's taken me a long time to find my way into a field of study that I love, instead of one that I strangely thought would be more stable, but I'm excited about the future. I've been writing professionally for games. I've been freelancing for one of the larger tabletop game companies, and I'm about to join the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. I took such a winding path to where I am today, and I'm so grateful that you were there at the start of my journey. Okay. So on the one hand, there's the text of what this student is saying, her evident pride in what she has achieved. On the other hand, I hope you don't miss the subtext, the fits and starts, the mistakes along the way, the winding path, the failures, the intermittent bad year or two. I am guessing some of you know something about bad years. If I had to title this talk, I would call it Bad Years, which does not sound like something that gets turned into a book. I know about bad years. I'm sure the other presenters here tonight do as well. As perhaps you know, bad years sometimes come seemingly out of nowhere. Sometimes in the midst of what had seemed to be a fine, perhaps even a very good year. On August 2nd, 1993, I was having a very good year. I had recently graduated from college. I was 2 weeks from beginning a PhD program in English at the University of Florida. Things were getting serious with the young woman who is now my wife. I was feeling pretty good about life. That summer, like most summers at the time, I worked construction. On the day in question, we were sawing off big squares of asphalt on a warehouse roof and then throwing them over the side. It was 7:30 in the morning. I was on my way back from break and I saw a piece of asphalt and I bent to pick it up and it gave. And I stepped backwards right through a thin plastic skylight. I had just enough time to say what I thought was my last lecture, which was, oh no. And then I fell 30 feet face first onto a concrete slab below. Some of you have heard the Nietzschean expression, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I am not entirely sure about that. I worry that such truisms sell real human trauma short. But I can attest, what doesn't kill you definitely makes you different than you might have been. I don't know what the didn't fall through a skylight version of me looks like, figuratively and literally. I don't know how that guy fares in life. I do know that that particular setback, the demolished face, the swallowed teeth, the fractured hip, the wired jaws, that stuff shaped me in indelible ways. Which leads me to another suspicious truism, one I'm sure you have all heard before. Life gives you lemons, make lemonade. I don't know who first said that, but that person must have lived a truly charmed life. Here are Martha Stewart's fancy directions for how to make lemonade. Step 1, juice 12 lemons. In a small saucepan, combine sugar and 2.5 cups of water. Boil, let cool. Step 2, combine all ingredients with 4 cups of water and ice. Serve. That is not hard. It is easy to make lemonade. Lemons are this close to being delicious. It's 2 simple steps. What about when life gives you a devastating pandemic? Today, I'm sure y'all heard we crossed the 500,000 Americans dead threshold. What about when life gives you white supremacists masquerading as patriots? What about when life gives you politicians who double down and then triple down and then quadruple down on important lies? What about when life gives you a job loss, or the loss of your home, or the loss of a loved one? These things are not lemons. To call those lemons is a disservice to citrus. It is also a disservice to real human suffering. We need to call that stuff what it is. It's terrifying, it's infuriating, it's awful, it's depressing. Bad years are bad years. To claim otherwise, as the esteemed philosopher Harry G. Frankfurt has warned us, is bullshit. But bad years can sometimes be put to good use, eventually, in time. You take the stuff of bad years, you bury it in the ground, you let it decompose, then you plant a lemon tree, you wait for the lemons to grow, you juice the lemons, you add some sugar and water, and you're in business. Sometimes that's the best any of us can do. I'll tell you another story. 4 months after I fell through a building, I began graduate school. I showed up for my first class feeling fairly self-conscious. I had no friends, some really odd looking dentures, and I was about 40 pounds underweight. But I was eager to get to it. For the first meeting of my first class, the professor went around the room asking each of us to introduce ourselves. What are you studying? Where are you in the program? And it quickly became clear to me that I was the only person in class who was not already working on a dissertation. This meant I was 5 years behind everyone else in the class. When it was my turn, I was honest. I said, hey, this is my first day of my first class in graduate school. At which point the professor elected to eviscerate me out loud in front of the class. He took this sort of mocking tone and he asked me, had I read Hegel? Had I read Heidegger? Was I familiar with Kant? What about Foucault? Did I know Derrida? Did I know Lacan? And of course, the answer to all these questions was, who? Like I had no idea what he's talking about. His goal, as best I can tell, was twofold. First, he really wanted to humiliate me. And second, he really wanted me to drop his class. I will tell you, he was wildly successful on both points. I still remember distinctly walking across campus after that class was let out and thinking, I should just quit and go home. But then, this is true, I had another thought. That's not the worst thing that's happened to me in the last 6 months. And so I stuck it out. And what followed have been the best 21 years of my life. The best years of my life, 21 of them here at Longwood. And so here I am talking to some of my favorite people in the world about bad years. Let me give you a quick side note. If you don't already know this, it's true. It's a not so secret secret. Any person working at this university, if you ask them what's the best part of your job, they will invariably give you the same answer. It's the students. You people are the best part of a great job. And I'm super humbled to have had the opportunity to share some thoughts with you tonight. I will simply say in closing, bad years are bad years. Many of us have had a bad year. Let's just do the best we can to put it to good use if and when we get the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. That is a wonderful ending to our last lecture this year. So everyone, please feel free to give a round of applause, give your thoughts in the chat, even cheer out loud at this point. I don't care. Feel free to unmute and scream. Do what you feel. And sort of in closing, I can sort of close this up. I want to first thank all of our speakers very much for not only attending tonight, but for being amazing professors who the student body just absolutely loves and cherishes. You were elected by students for that very reason, and we thank you so much for giving your words of wisdom. They were wonderful tonight. And thank you all on behalf of Mortar Board for coming tonight. This has been wonderful. This was our 10th annual one, and tune in sometime next year for the next last lecture in 2022. And if you have the opportunity to pick up the book and read it, it's really wonderful. It's a great read. It is worth your time. But sort of on an ending note, stay safe, wear your mask and remember that we have bad years and let's get past it.
Thanks, everyone. Good job. Good job, Grace. Yay.
Well done, Grace. That was awesome. Well done, fellow presenters.
You too,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Taylor. Always great to see you. Thank you, Grace.
Glad to see everybody.
Thank you all. You
Thanks.
did
Bye,
amazing.
everybody.